I'm here today to make sure that the House committee's illegitimate investigations of my family do not proceed on distortions, manipulated evidence, and lies.
A defiant and rare public appearance by Hunter Biden today, hours before the House would vote to officially approve an impeachment inquiry into his father. Good evening, I'm Ellison Barber in for Gadi Schwartz, and you're watching. Stay tuned now. The Republican-led House has voted to formally open an impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden. Republicans say the vote to do so, which was along party lines, will allow relevant GOP committee leaders to enforce subpoenas and fully carry out their investigations amid what are sure to be legal challenges from the White House. At the heart of the investigation is the president's son, Hunter Biden, whom Republicans have been trying to find an illegal connection between his work and his father. So far, they've been unsuccessful. Ethical questions have been raised, but so far, Republicans have not produced any evidence that the president acted corruptly or took bribes while he was president or vice president. Tonight, the Biden administration is describing the impeachment inquiry as, quote, illegitimate and a political stunt. Back on the Hill, and depending on who was talking, Republicans accused Democrats of shielding the president's family from legitimate scrutiny. Watch.
This is an impeachment inquiry. That's all. What are my Democratic colleagues afraid of if there's nothing to see there? Maybe that is all the more reason for the inquiry.
The American people deserve transparency and accountability, and that's exactly what they're going to get from this Republican House.
Democrats on the Hill, they had a very different take. They say this is about something entirely different. They say it's all political payback.
Why is the MAGA wing of the Republican Party resorting to this political stunt? 2 words: Donald Trump.
This is about doing Donald Trump's bidding. This is about addressing Donald Trump's own grievances around his own 2 impeachments.
Every single one of their crazy claims has been exhaustively debunked. Yet here we are.
Correspondent Ryan Nobles joins me now from Capitol Hill. Ryan, Republicans kept all of their votes. What are your sources saying about how this vote actually went down?
Ellison, it's pretty clear that the new Speaker, Mike Johnson, really worked his conference to make sure that every single person was in line so that they could state pretty clearly that they believe that this was an important step in the impeachment process. The formalization of this inquiry doesn't necessarily restart it. This is something that's been ongoing since September when the former House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, launched it without a vote. But it should give these investigators on these different congressional committees more power to enforce their subpoenas, to collect the documents that they're looking for, and just give more heft to the weight of this investigation. Of course, this is just a step in this process. This is not articles of impeachment yet. That's still a bridge that will likely need to be crossed by Republicans. But taking this step definitely points to that happening sometime in the near future, Ellison.
So remind us about that bridge and just the process here. What exactly does happen next, and what should people be looking for in the weeks and months to come?
Well, there are 3 committees investigating the president and his family's business dealings, attempting to find some sort of evidence that there's a direct financial connection and also a direct influence connection between the president and his capacity as either vice president or even another public office that he held that helped his son or some other family member get ahead in some way, shape, or form. They're going to continue to investigate, collect those documents, interview the relevant witnesses, and then they'll issue a final report once that investigation wraps up. They'll submit that final report to the Speaker, who will then decide whether or not it is worth it to move ahead with articles of impeachment. Now, that will be a much more difficult vote for many of these moderate Republicans to cast. There are many Republicans that currently reside in districts that were won by President Biden in 2020, who their constituents may not be willing to go through the impeachment process at this level. What Republicans are telling their constituents now is that there's a lot of smoke here. We want to find out if there is fire. If these investigators aren't able to deliver deliver that fire, it will be a lot more difficult for them to get to the articles of impeachment stage. And then, of course, it's going to come at the height of the 2024 re-election campaign. So it could be something that could truly damage President Biden, but it's also something that could easily backfire on Republicans.
So, Ryan, I have to ask you, because it's kind of mind-boggling that in your career on Capitol Hill, there have been 3 presidential impeachment inquiries so far, and that's just in the last 5 years. People can and do debate whether or not each of those were necessary or the circumstances surrounding it. Putting all that aside, let's just talk about the numbers here. This is unprecedented. Are we seeing the start of what is going to just be the new normal when it comes to impeachment inquiries and life on Capitol Hill?
I mean, there is a real concern about that, Ellison. When you talk to rank-and-file members that are up here for the right reasons, that are just trying to pass laws and improve the lives of their constituents, there is this concern that we're just going to get into a cycle where a president gets elected and an impeachment inquiry is officially launched, whether or not there's tangible evidence to that effect. Now, that's not to cast any kind of judgment on this current impeachment inquiry or the ones that came before it, but we are definitely in a very polarized political cycle where that's certainly possible. And it's not just impeachment inquiries. You know, we saw a member expelled for the first time in a very long time, more than 2 decades. We've seen multiple censure resolutions come to the House floor. That is something that used to only happen once in a blue moon. So it just makes it more difficult for these members from both sides of the aisle to come together for the common good when they're constantly bickering and fighting with each other over these kind of things like impeachments, censure resolutions, and expulsions. It's not the way Congress is supposed to work.
All right, Ryan Nobles, thank you. Before the House formally voted to open their Biden impeachment investigation, his son, Hunter Biden, breaking from his usual silence, speaking rather forcefully outside of the Capitol today. He acknowledged his past missteps, but denied any wrongdoing by his father. He did all of this instead of sitting down for a closed-door deposition.
I'm here today to acknowledge that I've made mistakes in my life and wasted opportunities and privileges I was afforded. For that, I'm responsible. Let me state as clearly as I can. My father was not financially involved in my business, not as a practicing lawyer, not as a board member of Burisma, not in my partnership with a Chinese private businessman, not in my investments at home nor abroad.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos is here with more. So, Danny, we say Hunter Biden doesn't usually speak publicly. We have heard him on podcasts and other places like that. But he pretty forcefully went through these allegations. I'm going to lay all this out. As an attorney, when you see that, are you like, oh, my goodness, every attorney says don't talk? Did he get himself or put his legal team in a position that's going to be more difficult for them down the way? Or was he careful and smart in the way he chose his words here?
First, I believe his legal team was involved every step of the way. I believe Hunter Biden listens to his attorneys. There are a lot of other high-profile defendants right now that I get the feeling do what they want to do. And as a criminal defense attorney, I can tell you sometimes clients decide they're going to do what they're going to do, not realizing the irony that doing things their way is why they need a criminal defense lawyer in the first place. But Hunter Biden, I believe, had every word approved by his attorneys. He was reading from a script. There was some interesting, the word financially instead of just involved. Why add financially? But, you know, I'm really parsing the words here. Overall, it was a pretty forceful denial. So as an attorney, the general rule of thumb is you don't want your clients giving press conferences. But if you look at those words, there really wasn't a whole lot in there that was going to harm him. I mean, after all, it was just a straight denial on everything. This is not true. This is not true. This is not true. So in the world of risk-averse criminal defense attorneys, and we are risk-averse, Hunter Biden's defense team has, if nothing else, been interesting. They've got panache. They are aggressive at times. This move today, showing up and saying, no, I'm not going to go to the deposition. I dare you to hold me in contempt, knowing that contempt in the congressional context is often a hollow threat, unlike judicial contempt, which can be at the whim of any judge.
Let's listen to some of what Republicans have had to say, because they are incredibly frustrated that he has not come in for a closed-door deposition. They say they're going to punish him. Again, Congress has limited teeth here, but let's listen and then we'll talk after.
This is about public corruption at the highest levels. And, you know, the president's son does not get to set the rules. Now we're in the phase where we do the depositions. And, what he did today is unacceptable.
Are you going forward with contempt? So we will begin looking at that. Both lawyers for the Oversight Committee, lawyers for the Judiciary Committee will move in that direction. But look, when Congress asks you to come, you're supposed to come and testify.
Now, if I remember correctly, Hunter Biden did say he was willing to do a deposition and to testify publicly. He just didn't want to do it behind closed doors. From a legal standpoint, and I guess political in some ways, what is the difference? Why are Republicans so adamant that this needs to be a closed-door deposition instead of some sort of public testimony?
Number one, public testimony would likely involve questioning by actual members of Congress, although we've seen some exceptions to that rule. But generally speaking, they're not going to be as good at taking a deposition as somebody who has taken many depositions. And I've taken a lot of depositions. There is an art to it. I'm not saying I'm particularly great at it, but you really can, with the right attorney, get to the heart of a lot of very uncomfortable matters during a deposition. So I think Hunter Biden's team wants this to be in the open, to show the public what he thinks is an unfair piece of treatment by Congress, and in addition, to try and make sure that members of Congress who are less skilled at deposing witnesses depose him in public, rather than someone who's an expert, a lawyer who takes probably hundreds of depositions, who knows how to get to the bad stuff.
Okay, so what is next for Hunter Biden? I mean, he has this going on with Congress, but he's also facing serious criminal charges, federal tax charges, as well as a gun charge. What happens next?
So what happens now from this point, the case will go through discovery. The government will turn over discovery. I imagine a lot of this Hunter already has, and they will prepare for trial. In federal court, 90 days normally under speedy trial, although it can be extended for a lot of different reasons. We've seen that already in even Donald Trump's federal cases and all the different federal cases we've covered over the last few years. But generally speaking, federal court moves a lot faster. So we can expect Hunter Biden, if he is going to go to trial relatively quickly. This is not going to be drawn out for several years. However, I will say that I wouldn't be surprised if Hunter Biden again broaches a plea agreement. It's got to hurt, because his original plea agreement was awesome. I mean, it is so great that he was offered pretrial diversion. And let me give you an example. I do a good deal of federal practice. I didn't even know pretrial diversion existed in the federal system. And I looked it up statistically. It barely exists. The point is, it doesn't happen very often. Yes, Hunter Biden lost it, but now he's really just situated like many other federal criminal defendants. And if he can get this down to a misdemeanor, he's charged with at least one misdemeanor. If he can plead this down to a federal misdemeanor, he's looking good. That might be the direction he goes, rather than put not only himself, but his father and his family through a public trial.
So there's nothing legally that prohibits a defendant in a case from trying to get a plea deal again if they already had one before?
Not at all. In fact, the contours of the case can move up and down like a stock market ticker. You know, in other words, your case can get worse, it can get better, and oftentimes when you get to the eve of trial, especially in civil cases, the stakes are high, there's a lot of risk, people are more willing to talk plea agreements. But I will tell you, the federal government never indicts a case that they are not 100% ready on the day of trial to proceed. I mean, when they make their cases, they're organized, they plan, they don't indict until they think they are ready to go to trial. So I still think Hunter Biden should explore, I would recommend explore a plea deal if the government's open to it, even if it will never be as sweet as that first one. Fascinating stuff. A lot to keep watching. Danny Savalos, NBC legal analyst, thank you. As the death toll in Gaza surpasses 18,000, international condemnation for Israel's military offensive in Gaza grows even louder. And yet today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu once again rejected calls for a ceasefire and promised his country's military will press ahead with their campaign, quote, until the end. But in their campaign to end Hamas, there seems to be no end to the suffering for the children of Gaza. And in the middle of the chaos of rockets falling on Rafah, people there are trying to find moments just to mourn the growing number of dead.
هاي الأطفال مين بقتلوا الأطفال؟ في غير أطفال بقتلوهم ما فيش هذول أبرياء الله عز وجل قتلوهم بأيدي نجسة حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل.
On top of deadly airstrikes and intense fighting on the ground, cities across Gaza are dealing with another major problem: heavy rain. Parts of the Jabalia refugee camp in the north are now underwater. Aid groups said the rain severely damaged many makeshift tents in the camp area. Meanwhile, here in the United States, President Biden met with the families of American hostages taken by Hamas on October 7th during that terror attack. Right now, there are 8 Americans still listed as unaccounted for. NBC News senior Washington correspondent and anchor of Hallie Jackson Now, Hallie Jackson, joins us from Tel Aviv. Hallie, how did things go between the president and the families of those missing Americans today? And what's the latest on Israel's search for the hostages still believed to be inside of Gaza?
Hey there, Ellison. It's good to see you tonight. By all accounts, the meeting went smoothly between President Biden and those Americans whose family members are believed to be held inside Gaza. The hostage family members themselves came out and spoke, one of them calling it a terrific meeting. The sense is, they say, that they believe that the president understands that the people they love, the people who have been kidnapped, who were taken, they believe, on October 7th in that terror attack, are not just numbers on a spreadsheet, that they are people. They are sons and grandsons and fathers, et cetera. And that was important to these folks. On the flip side of things, at the White House perspective, we've heard now from John Kirby, who is the National Security Council spokesperson, saying that President Biden was grateful that these family members gave him their time, but also referencing what's coming up here in just, I guess, about a week or two here, and that's the holiday, saying that there is an irrepressible ache and a worry and a fear that these families will feel if their loved ones are not home in time for the holidays, which, of course, brings us to the question of the potential for a hostage release here. Could that kind of negotiation happen, and could it happen sometime soon? There is a sense of urgency to this here, not just because of the sense of desperation that is setting in now 2 months plus since this war began, but also because of health concerns. One woman that I spoke with whose sister is being held says that other hostages who are now freed reported back that her sister is alive but badly wounded after being shot in the hand when she was abducted here. So that is adding to the idea that this needs to move quickly in the eyes of these family members. Is it going to happen? Well, listen, there's nothing super concrete to report at this point, right? But presumably behind the scenes, these discussions are ongoing. We know that there are some high-level visits from the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, here to Israel later this week, from the Defense Secretary to the region, Lloyd Austin, the U.S. Defense Secretary coming to the region as well, meeting with the Qataris who have played such an important role in these truce negotiations. You have to imagine, too, that for Jake Sullivan in particular, the push for more humanitarian aid into Gaza is also going to be a topic of conversation. That is an area where the U.S. has suggested that Israel could be doing more, Ellison.
Hallie, the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research released a new study today, and it really stood out to me because it was conducted in the last month, something that they did after the October 7th terror attack. And in this, they spoke to over 1,000 Palestinians, both in the West Bank and in Gaza, asking about support for Hamas. Again, all of this since the war began. And in both places, support, according to this poll, increased. In the West Bank, it actually tripled. Prior to this, I think of an Arab Barometer poll that was conducted before October 7th, where the majority of Palestinians in Gaza had said they had little or no trust in Hamas and their ability to govern inside of Gaza. It seems like there is something really changing in terms of the way Palestinians feel. You look at this new poll, and there appears to be growing support for Hamas in Palestinian territories, growing international condemnation of Israel for their military offensive, and this growing civilian death toll. Is Israel achieving their objectives here? Is it possible they may be losing a larger war?
So 2 interesting and 2 separate questions, Ellison, as you have laid out there, right? So on the first one, is Israel achieving their objectives? The objective now is to, in the words of Israeli officials and politicians, is to eliminate Hamas, is to wipe Hamas off the face of the earth. You have heard that, I know, in your time here since the war began. We have heard that being here and talking to some of these Israeli leaders. And that is the laser focus for Israelis at this point, is on the leadership level, members of government, to the point where I've had some semi-political discussions, and it keeps going back to this issue of wanting to eliminate Hamas. That is the stated goal. That obviously has not been the case to this point, and there are serious questions, to get to your second question, about what about the broader picture? Where does this go the morning after right? This war is over here. And there you are seeing a major disconnect. I think what is a growing disconnect between, and publicly emerging, between what Israel wants to see and what many in the international community are hoping to see, and some of that pressure building, and that is the potential for some kind of a two-state solution. You had, for example, the Israeli ambassador to the UK going on Sky News today saying that that is just not something that Israel wants to see. You have the State Department spokesperson today saying there can be no lasting peace without a Palestinian state, right? So this is something that is in some ways intractable, and it has been for a long time, but it is also something that is going to have to be pursued on the diplomatic level, because again, there's just a question of what do you do in the Gaza Strip, right? What happens in these locations after this war is over? And so from the sort of diplomatic political question, that is what's coming up. I will say, and you probably know this too from your time here, one of the things we keep hearing is we'll deal with that later. It's been 2.5 months now. The question is, when does this intense phase of fighting begin to end? There are some suggestions that Israel will perhaps be nearing the beginning of the end, considering that that's how Benjamin Netanyahu phrased it as it related to the deterioration, he sees it, of Hamas leadership. Still a question mark, Ellison.
Hallie Jackson in Tel Aviv, thank you as always. We really appreciate it. Roughly 90% of the more than 2.2 million people who live in Gaza are now displaced, many now living in makeshift tents and trying to shield themselves from the war outside. Our team in Gaza visited one of those tent cities. NBC News correspondent Hala Gourani has more.
3 miles from southern Gaza's border with Egypt, a makeshift tent city in the sand for thousands of displaced Gazans. This is where the Israeli military says they should be safe, bathing in plastic buckets, the blistered feet of those who've walked a long way to this camp. I swear I'm asking to die in my house, not on the border, Aya Bakar says. They are running from the bombs and the shelling, but it's the dirty water that could become the next big killer here.
We have the most serious acute gastroenteritis we have ever seen in our practice. Due to bad sanitation, due to bad water, to dirty water.
At Dr. Ahmed Al-Farah's hospital in southern Gaza, children wait to be treated in overcrowded hallways. My son's condition, Muna Al-Khul says, diarrhea and stomach poisoning, flu-like symptoms because of the cold. These stories are everywhere, even for those lucky enough to have a roof over their heads.
Here we make tea and coffee.
Sharing a single room with a dozen family members, for Fatah and Al-Farah's elderly parents, the medication has run out.
And since I came here, I'm trying to find these medicines for my mother. I couldn't find any one of them.
With so much of Gaza destroyed, for many, even when the bombs stop falling, there may be nowhere left to go. Hala Gourani, NBC News.
Don't go anywhere, because we are just getting started. Pretty much every Tesla sold here in the United States needs a software update after an investigation was looking into a handful of crashes. Plus, love it or hate it, you have probably heard Wham's Last Christmas at least once this season. But a viral game called Whamageddon is taking over. We will explain. And he thought he was filming his final moments, but he actually survived a brutal shark attack. That incredible story is just ahead, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. The Supreme Court will hear a case challenging the FDA's approval of a commonly used abortion pill, setting up a fight that could have ramifications across the country, even in states where abortion remains legal. They haven't set a date for arguments, but they could have a ruling by the end of their term in June. Former Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani was back in court today and got a stern lecture from the judge in his defamation trial for continuing to repeat false allegations about Georgia election workers Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. Giuliani falsely accused the mother and daughter of committing election fraud while counting ballots in the 2020 election. The judge already ruled he defamed both of them and had no evidence to support his claims. A jury is deciding right now how much he has to pay them. Freeman, she took the stand and told the court that she had to leave her home because of threats after Giuliani accused her of manipulating ballots. Earlier today, a federal court appeared to deny former President Trump's attempt to use presidential immunity in the upcoming E. Jean Carroll defamation trial. The court said Trump waited too long and should have raised it as a defense 3 years ago when the former magazine columnist sued in 2019. A Georgia high school baseball player who was hit in the head by a bat has died. 18-year-old Jeremy Medina had been in a coma since the accident happened at his school's batting cage a few weeks ago. His family announced yesterday that his heart stopped and say they are grateful for all the prayers and support they've received. And 2 Washington, D.C. professional sports teams are heading to a new home across the Potomac River.
The 9 million square foot district will feature the global headquarters for monumental sports and entertainment, an extraordinary state-of-the-art arena that will be the home to both the Washington Capitals and the Washington Wizards.
By 2028, the 2 teams will play in Alexandria, Virginia, bringing new life to the growing neighborhood. Capital One Arena, that's the current home for the teams in D.C. It will be renovated with plans to add more seating and a live music venue. 6 of the 15 people charged as fake pro-Trump electors in Michigan were in court today. Prosecutors introduced key evidence, giving us the fullest glimpse yet at the case against them. NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster has this report. Hey there, Shaq.
Hi there, Ellison. Well, look, the purpose of today's hearing was essentially to see if there was enough evidence for the state to move this case forward. The judge is making a decision on whether or not there was enough probable cause in this case. The state is alleging that these defendants essentially tried to work together to commit forgery when they allegedly signed a document saying that they were the duly elected electors for the state of Michigan and sent that off to the National Archives. This is a scheme. This is an effort that we saw play out multiple times in multiple states right after the 2020 election. But what is notable about what we saw today is that this is the first time that in open court we heard witnesses come up and testify to pieces of this scheme. We heard cross-examinations from the defense attorneys of these defendants, and we also saw evidence admitted again in open court for the first time in any of these individual cases. The first witness to come up and take the stand was a state trooper, a veteran state trooper for Michigan State Police. He said that he interacted with some of these fake electors. I want you to listen to a little bit of that moment inside court today.
I told him that the people that were on the list that had been granted permission to come into the Capitol that day to participate in the Electoral College vote had already arrived at the Capitol inside, and that the Capitol was supposed to be business and they were not going to be allowed in.
In some cross-examinations, we heard from defense attorneys trying to establish that their clients did not interact with this officer and that he couldn't recall or he couldn't place any of the individuals who were there about 3 years ago at this point. We hear from defense attorneys, them trying to establish essentially the idea that their clients were making legal objections to the election results and weren't trying to defraud, that there was no intent to defraud when they took that action, again, back in December of 2020. This process we're seeing play out in several other states. Just last week in Wisconsin, we saw a civil settlement with some of those fake electors. And in Nevada, we saw their fake electors charged and indicted. That process will be playing out. We know other states say they are still investigating. As for these preliminary hearings, we know there could be another full day of testimony tomorrow. And there's perhaps the potential that we can see another day of preliminary hearings for these defendants come up in the weeks and months to come. Ellison?
Shaq Brewster, thank you. The Federal Reserve is holding interest rates steady once again. This is the 3rd time they have done this year since July, leaving rates where they are. It also hinted that some cuts might be on the way. NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung joins us now with more on today's decision and what it means for the economy as we enter the new year. Hey, Brian.
Hey there, Ellison. Well, the Federal Reserve deciding not to raise interest rates in this meeting. But what's interesting is even though they didn't do anything on interest rates, they suggested that their next move could be an interest rate cut. That hasn't happened since 2020. For what it's worth, this is really important because a lot of Americans have been wondering, well, mortgage rates have risen from like 3% to 8%. We've also seen credit card borrowing rates skyrocket as of the past few years. Well, that is in part due to the Federal Reserve. So if they start to cut interest rates at some point, that could make some of those borrowing costs come down a little bit. Now, the Federal Reserve is saying, look, we're not yet committing to an interest rate cut now, and that's because their mission of getting inflation down to their target is not yet accomplished. For what it's worth, the Federal Reserve over the last 2 years or so has been aggressively raising interest rates to try to make the rate of inflation come down, the inflation that we've been feeling at the stores. The pace of price increases was something like 9% in the summer of last year. As of a reading that we got yesterday in the morning, it's now about 3.1%. So the bite of what the Federal Reserve has been doing is being seen. But the problem is that the Fed's target is not 3%. It's 2%. So the last mile might be the hardest for them. But they're saying, look, we might not have to raise interest rates further. We can keep them cruising at this high level right now. And then if signs of improvement in this economy show that they can bear it, they can start to ease on those interest rates, bring them back down a little bit, which for the first time since they've started hiking rates, they seem to indicate in the meeting today, which again could be good news for those that are on the sidelines trying to perhaps buy a house. Although, Ellison, I want to point out, don't expect to see those 3% mortgage rates anytime soon. Back to you.
Brian Jung, thank you. Coming up, a high-speed chase caught on camera, but get this, it was a stolen Amazon van. We have those details, but first, you gotta see this. Do you love Doritos so much you wish you could not only eat them, but drink them? No? Fair? Yes? Dream no further. Doritos, they are working with a drink company called Empirical to bring a boozy twist to the iconic cheesy snack. The savory limited edition alcohol, yes, that is for real, is distilled with the flavor of nacho cheese Doritos made to taste just like the real thing. Pre-orders for the Spirit open today, and it is already sold out. But they say more will hit the shelves next month. Would you drink it? Maybe, yes, no, we'll try it once. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Here are some of the stories happening out west that we're following. The University of Nevada, Las Vegas had a vigil earlier today to remember the 3 people killed in the on-campus shooting last week. Students and staff gathered on campus with posters of the victims. The memorial honored the legacies of the 3 professors that were killed. The gunman, Anthony Polito, he opened fire back on December 6th in the college's business school. He was killed by police at the scene. A college student in Washington was killed after apparently being exposed to carbon monoxide in a student housing unit. It happened at Evergreen State College. Police received a call Monday night that students in a housing unit couldn't be contacted. An officer reportedly responded, performed emergency CPR. 1 student died and 2 others are in the hospital now. The college says every on-campus residence has both smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. And in New Mexico, the state Supreme Court heard oral arguments today over an abortion lawsuit. Abortion is legal there, but some local governments have passed ordinances restricting access. The state's attorney general challenged those restrictions in a lawsuit back in January, and now almost a year later, the state's highest court is taking up the case. A sex scandal involving one of Florida's most powerful political couples has rocked the state's GOP. One half of the couple is the chair of Florida's Republican Party. The other half is the co-founder of conservative group Moms for Liberty and serves on a school board. Both are entangled in the fallout of a sexual assault investigation and refusing to step down. NBC News correspondent Noah Pransky has more.
Outrage, both outside.
She has turned this school board into a circus.
And inside.
It is the distraction du jour.
A Sarasota County School Board meeting with critics calling for the resignation of board member and co-founder of Moms for Liberty, Bridget Ziegler.
The resolution recommends that Bridget Ziegler immediately take all steps necessary to voluntarily resign.
The non-binding vote passed.
I am disappointed.
Ziegler did not resign. But why is this such a big deal? Ziegler co-founded Moms for Liberty, a parents group aggressively pushing for more conservative policies in schools, including bans on some books and lessons related to certain race, gender, and sexuality issues. She's also married to the chair of the Republican Party of Florida, Christian Ziegler, who now faces allegations of sexual battery, including rape. But Bridget isn't accused of any legal wrongdoing.
The blowback has generally, for her, been sort of steeped in the idea that she's being a hypocrite, and that is because the allegations of the sex scandal are that there was a threesome, and a threesome that involves another woman.
The Florida Center for Government Accountability first reported the alleged rape described in a search warrant affidavit. It details what was supposed to be a consensual three-way encounter that included Bridget. But it says when Bridget canceled, Christian went to the victim's house anyway. Sarasota police have not confirmed or denied the authenticity of the detailed affidavit, which has been widely reported. But last month, police provided NBC News a heavily redacted report mentioning rape and sexual battery when asked for a complaint filed against Ziegler. Christian Ziegler's lawyer says Sarasota police are investigating, but his client is innocent. Ziegler has not been charged. Bridget Ziegler, meanwhile, who did not return NBC News' request for comment, has tried to conduct business as usual these last few weeks.
I serve on another public board, and this issue did not come up, and we were able to forge ahead with the business of the board.
But the scandal has rocked the Florida GOP, with some calling on Governor Ron DeSantis to use his executive power to remove Bridget from boards.
And it's had some huge political ripple effects here that the party is still figuring out how to kind of deal with.
Moms for Liberty says Bridget stepped down as co-founder years ago, but, quote, has remained an avid warrior for parental rights, adding that the allegations against Christian should be fully investigated. DeSantis, who endorsed Bridget for the Sarasota School Board, has not yet commented on whether she should resign, but publicly urged her husband to step down as party chair. Now, some of the state's top Republicans have called an emergency meeting this weekend to discuss potential disciplinary actions against him. With neither Ziegler indicating any plans to step down, the future remains in limbo both for this power couple and the Republican Party of Florida.
Noah Pransky, thank you. If you are afraid of sharks, this next story might be a little hard to watch. An incredibly frightening video of a 20-year-old being attacked by a shark is making the rounds on social media. He was bitten so badly, he lost half of his right leg. He filmed what he thought were his final moments, but as the story goes, he amazingly lived to tell the tale. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock has more.
Terrifying footage shows the seconds after a 20-year-old got attacked by a shark that ended with him losing a leg below his knee. You can hear the panic in his voice and that of his friend, who he says saved his life, dragging him back onto shore. Matteo Mariotti, an Italian student studying abroad, posting on social media over the weekend that he recorded that footage because he wanted to say goodbye. It happened on Friday on a beach in Queensland in northeastern Australia. Mariotti was on a trip there to work and study. He told an Italian newspaper from his hometown of Parma that he tried to open the shark's mouth and even with difficulty freed his leg, even though he says he knew that from the knee down, there was nothing left. In the aftermath of the attack, Mariotti says his friend applied a tourniquet.
In the first seconds, it was really panic for me. And after that, I tried to think what I have to do. And I tried just my best to save him.
Paramedics then telling NBC News the wounds were serious and daunting to look at. Just days before this terrible incident, someone else sharing this video of the area where the shark attacked Mariotti, writing that the water is, quote, full of fish and sharks. You can see some of their fins there in the water. Unprovoked shark attacks gaining international attention over the last week, following 2 people dying in rare encounters. One woman killed in Mexico and another in the Bahamas. This year, there have been at least 17 unprovoked shark attacks just in Australia. Globally, there have been 95 unprovoked attacks. For the most part, shark attacks haven't gone up significantly in recent years, but experts say that sharks' behavior could be changing due to climate change, making ocean waters warmer. That's causing the animals they eat to move, so sharks are moving along with them, sometimes to places where a lot more people happen to be. Matteo has been flooded with messages of support from all over the world, including from an amputee who says that he is still able to live his life like any able-bodied person. Matteo saying he is just grateful right now to be alive. In Miami, Sam Brock, NBC News. Back to you.
Thanks, Sam. It is that time of the year when your packages go missing, especially those Amazon packages. But what about a whole Amazon truck? That is what happened in South Florida after a man drove an Amazon van off of a dealership lot. Shocking dashcam footage shows the high-speed chase to get it back. Kim Wynn from our NBC affiliate in South Florida has more.
With sirens blaring,
Dash cam video takes us inside the high-speed chase of this stolen Amazon truck. Investigators say the man behind the wheel was Jose Carlos Blanqueset, who Florida Highway Patrol says had just stolen the truck from a North Miami car dealership. The truck was delivering parts. A state trooper keeps a close distance to the truck as it swerves in and out of express lanes onto the shoulder and crosses all lanes of traffic on I-95. The trooper uses a pit maneuver to try to stop it near the 69th Street exit, but it doesn't work. The trooper goes in for a second pit maneuver. Again, it's unsuccessful. The driver regains control of the truck, crossing into the express barrier and takes off again. A third pit maneuver causes the truck to spin out of the express lanes, but the driver somehow regains control and continues the chase. A fourth pit maneuver causes glass to shatter and debris to fly from both vehicles, but it doesn't stop the pursuit. At some point, the trooper's car gives out. In the middle of the chase, investigators say the suspect abandoned the truck and started running, eventually surrendering to officers.
Can you afford to hire an attorney, sir?
Not yet. Blanqueset appeared in court on Wednesday. During the hearing, it was revealed that the suspect also had a cocaine charge and allegedly attempted to sexually assault someone before stealing the truck. The details on that charge are still unclear.
You have a total bond of $50,000.
Kim Nguyen with our NBC affiliate in South Florida. Thank you. Still to come, a crazy scene in India's parliament today after two intruders broke in and unleashed smoke from canisters. That story and others trending around the world are next. Welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world. Ukraine says Russian missile strikes on Kyiv injured more than 50 people. It happened hours after Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, wrapped up a trip to Washington, D.C., where he was lobbying for more aid. The Ukrainian Air Force says the attack involved 10 missiles. All were intercepted, but they say falling debris damaged buildings and injured people in 4 different areas of the capital city. The airstrikes come on the heels of a massive cyber attack, which knocked out Ukraine's largest mobile phone and internet service provider. U.S. warships shot down a Houthi drone launched from Yemen. That's according to Pentagon officials. They say U.S. destroyers were responding to reports of an attack on a commercial ship in the Red Sea today when a drone headed in the direction of a U.S. warship. The Pentagon says it has not yet been able to determine if the warship was the intended target. A bit of a crazy scene inside India's parliament today after 2 men burst into the chamber shouting before letting off some kind of smoke spray. There was a brief scramble to try and catch the men before they were overpowered by security guards. It all happened on the 22nd anniversary of an attack on India's parliament in which 14 people were killed. And in northern China, they are dealing with their second snap of cold weather this week. Heavy snow shut down train service and closed schools, and now blizzard alerts have been issued for Beijing through tomorrow. The recent temperatures reflect a sharp contrast from the last couple of months, which turned out to be China's warmest in decades. Sticking with climate for a minute, COP28, that massive climate summit, it wrapped up in Dubai, and nearly 200 countries agreed to a deal that calls for a transition away from fossil fuels. It's a really big deal. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley has more.
So environmentalists and many delegates from developed economies wanted this final agreement to completely phase out fossil fuels. Instead, what they got in the end for this agreement, and it's important to mention, this is a non-binding agreement for the nearly 200 nations who signed on to it. It calls for transitioning away from fossil fuels towards zero emissions by 2050. Now, some of the greener voices at this summit, they also wanted to see tougher language against the construction of new coal power plants. But one big thing that everyone agrees is missing are solid financial commitments from rich countries to help poor countries transition toward lower emissions. That question is a big one. It still has to be ironed out. But, despite all this pessimism, there's a reason why this is such a big deal. This is the first time that a global agreement like this one has actually called on governments to roll back their use of fossil fuels. In fact, it's even the first time an agreement like this one has used the words fossil fuels. Now, that might sound symbolic, and it is, but it shows that there's a growing political will to try to fight climate change on a global level. And this conference was shrouded in low expectations from the beginning. It was hosted by the United Arab Emirates, one of the world's biggest petrostates, led by a conference president who runs that country's own state oil firm. But in the end, it surprised everyone at just the right moment. Emissions reached record highs this year, and it's also been the hottest year in recorded history.
Matt Bradley, thank you. Tonight, in the future of everything, more than 2 million Teslas are getting a major software upgrade after the automaker issued a massive recall on nearly all of its cars in the United States. This comes after a 2-year investigation from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration found Tesla's autopilot feature is not doing enough to keep drivers alert, leading to a higher risk of crashes. They investigated dozens of crashes that involved Tesla's auto steer program, some that were deadly. Now Tesla has cooperated with the investigation, but they did push back in a lengthy post on X earlier this week, saying its safety metrics are stronger when autopilot is engaged versus not. This was in response to a Washington Post article that focused on Tesla crashes where autopilot was used. Caleb Silver, the editor-in-chief at Investopedia, joins me now with more. So let's just start with what exactly this recall is, because usually you hear that word and you think, okay, I've got to send everything back. That's not the case here, right?
Yeah, that's not the way Tesla works.
Yeah.
Tesla's as much a software company as it is an auto manufacturer. So this is a software update, and this is an update to those controls. The traffic awareness cruise control system is part of this auto steer thing, limited access for freeways. In some cases, you can use it in the cities in some cases. But the software update, which has already started going out as of yesterday, makes additional control alerts to encourage drivers to adhere to their responsibilities when they're using autopilot. So it kind of puts the onus on the driver, but there's going to be more alerts on the dashboards, more sounds to make you pay attention, even though you might want to be in autopilot.
When we're talking about autonomous cars using AI to develop fully automated cars, Elon Musk actually talked to CNBC about this earlier this year. I want to play some of that, and then we will talk.
I think Tesla will have sort of a ChatGPT moment, maybe if not this year, I'd say no later than next year. Suddenly 3 million cars will be able to drive themselves with no one.
So there has been a lot of ambitious work around developing autonomous cars, but then at the same time, we've seen GM recalling their entire fleet of cruise cars, Tesla dealing with all of this. Realistically, and this is a hard question to answer, but are we looking at a realistic timeline, or do we know when this full revolution of self-driving cars might actually happen, or is this never going to really go off?
Well, that's a little bit of Elon being Elon, making big promises, but when you doubt Elon, sometimes you're surprised. That said, what could go wrong with ChatGPT powering our vehicles?
Right.
A lot, as it turns out. There's not a lot of nuance yet in ChatGPT, and there's not a lot of nuance in this software, and that's kind of behind the issue here. It is good for highways. It is good for city streets where there's predictability, but there's unpredictability in many streets and many roads around the country and around the world, and that's where you see a lot of these issues. The NHTSA is investigating 956 crashes, a lot of crashes. They're looking through a lot of data. So while this recall is something Tesla reluctantly agreed to, they're going to keep looking into this because the software is imperfect and there's a lot of nuance. There's issues with the cameras as well.
So I feel like we do stories or readers or blurbs on Elon Musk almost every day right now. He's making headlines constantly, and oftentimes it's not great. It's for things related to X, controversies surrounding comments that he's made on X or about X to advertisers. The list can go on and on. Has this at all impacted his stock when it comes to Tesla? Is it still holding up?
Yeah, it's up 94% this year.
Wow.
So I think it's holding up quite well. The stock market itself is up 20%. So Tesla's known for these massive rises, but also these amazing falls. It is a very volatile stock. That said, investors have believed in Tesla for a long time, and they've been rewarded for doing so. The stock, again, almost at 95% so far this year. It's not really hurting Elon Musk or Tesla as a publicly traded company.
That is fascinating. Caleb Silver, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. That does it for us tonight. I'm Ellison Barber. We'll see you tomorrow, but until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.